This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. So we were talking about a couple of things about the virtual machine service, the virtual machine service. So we initially said that virtual machine is a very classic example of infrastructure as a service, wherein we get something known as the infrastructure layer, and on top of which, whatever the operating system, the IIS, and everything, that is something that we have to install, and we did install that. So we basically created something known as a Windows Server virtual machine, and we said, okay, fine, if it's a Windows Server, what are the advantages of it versus a home operating system? And on a Windows Server operating system, we went ahead into something known as roles and features, and we have added a role known as IIS. And IIS role converts a virtual machine service into a web server. So IIS basically converts it into a web server, so you can create your own websites and everything. And we also seen yesterday about what are data disks and how do you attach, let's say, something known as a data disk to a virtual machine service. Now I want to further go ahead and ask you a question that, let's say you are given a virtual machine and you have a task right now to attach a data disk to it. Okay, so I am telling that you already created a virtual machine, or you already created a VM. Now you have a task right now that the client is asking you to go ahead and, let's say, attach something known as a data drive here. So what should be your first question? Anyone, online, offline, anyone. So I'm just telling, I'm your client. I'm just telling, okay, fine. I have a virtual machine service. Please go ahead and attach a data drive to it. So what would be your first question to this one? How much is the size? What is the space? Right. So the first question would be, what is the space of the drive? Because normally anyone would ask this first question that, you know what, okay, fine. Can you tell me what is the space of the drive that I want to go ahead and, let's say, create? Or let's say you want me to go ahead and attach. So the client would tell you some kind of a specification out here. Now, apart from space, are there any other deciding factors? Type of drive, premium or standard? Yes. So whether it's a premium or whether it's a a standard HDD or an SSD and etc. Apart from this, anything else? Space and, let's say, the type. Okay. So apart from this, I don't see anything else, isn't it? But there are two more factors which influence us when we create or when we want to attach a drive to a virtual machine. These two very important factors are called throughput and IOPS. These are the two factors that basically that we need to consider. Now let's understand what is throughput, what is IOPS. So for that, let me go into, let's say, my resource group. Let's go ahead and create a virtual machine service. So I'll say virtual machine and I'll say create. Now, once it comes up, let's go ahead and create a basic virtual machine service up here. So I'll just go ahead and say I do not have a resource group at this point. So let me go ahead and say this is VM RP, the VM resource group that I'm creating. And then I'll give a name to the virtual machine, something like VM-1. And then I'll say, okay, fine, I want to create it in a location called Central US. So I'll say, or East US, wherever, let's say, you see this free service is eligible, right? This is where I'm creating it out because I'm operating on a free trial account right now. So I'll say, okay, fine, this is, let's say, Central US. It says free services eligible. I'll pick this region up. And I said we'll look at this in a bit while. So I'm not covering this out right now, but this is a very important concept known as availability options, which we will look at in the coming classes. And then I am selecting something known as the image. And the image here is a Windows Server 2019 data center. So this is what I'm selecting. So it's a server operating system or it's a server image that I'm selecting right now. So let's come down and let's say test user and then give a password to it. So once I've given the password, then I have, let's say, something like the rules. So I can allow HTTP, RDP, and etc. so that I want to do an RDP later. And I'll say disks. This is the main concept that we are looking at today. And by default, it is telling that the OS disk is what a premium SSD. I'm okay with it. I'll just come down and I'll say I want now a data disk. Now it says, okay, fine. Do you want to attach an existing data disk, or do you want to create and attach a new disk? Now I do not have a data disk right now, so I'll say I'll create and attach a new disk out here, and I'll say, okay, fine, create this out. Now it says, what is your name? I'll say some random name like data disk hyphen 0. It's an empty disk that I'm creating, and then I have something called the size. And now it says, okay, fine, this is 1024 GB premium SSD disk. I'll just say click on change size, and now it says these are the available sizes out here. It's starting from all the way as small as, let's say, something around 4 GB. Like this is, let's say, the minimum size that you can create, which is 4 GB drive, and it can go a maximum of up to, let's say, 32,767 GB. This is the maximum size it can go up to. But I am not only interested in the size, but I am also interested in these two things. One known as a throughput, the other known as a provisioned IOPS. What are these two things? Now let's go back to our diagram and let's open up a new diagram out here. So I am creating a virtual machine service, and I am attaching the disk to this particular virtual machine service, right? So the disk is technically being attached to this particular virtual machine. Now once the disk is attached to it, let's put the disk here. Once the disk is attached to it, the virtual machine will start writing into the disk, meaning you will start copying the data. When I'm saying, let's say, copying the data into the disk or downloading the data from the disk, I am saying I am doing a write operation. So this is a write operation. So I am writing something. Now, if I want to, as a user, go into the disk, just look at the data, just see what is the data like. This is called a read operation, right? So you can have two types of operations, either a write or a read. You can also have delete and all that stuff. But delete and all those operations, we consider them to be a write operation out here. So I am dividing my operations into write or a read operation. Now, how many write or read operations that you can do per a second is decided by IOPS. IOPS, input and output speed per a second. Meaning, now I'm talking about something known as IOPS right now. Input and output speed per a second. Meaning, if I come back here, I have something known as provisioned IOPS, right? If I go for 1024 GB, I can read or I can write for 5000 times per a second on top of a disk. This is called as IOPS, meaning you can read or you can write the data 5000 times out here in a given second. Now, if you observe this carefully, as the size is increasing, even the IOPS is increasing. Meaning, if I go for a lesser size, the IOPS that I get here is 120. Meaning, I can write or I can read the data for 120 times per a second on my disk. Now, why is this important? This determines the speed of your drive. This determines the speed of your machine in turn. Because if the read and write operations are fast, which means that the operating system is also fast, which means that the machine is performing fast. Now let's imagine that you have, let's say, something like a website on top of this machine. and this website is using this disk in order to read and write data. Now imagine how fast that website will be. So that speed of the basically of the website, or that speed of the machine, is decided by this particular entity or this particular parameter called IOPS. Now I will now ask Microsoft that, you know what, I I will want to go for I rather want to go for just like 4 GB, but I need the provision IOPS to be 5000. Can it change? No. These values are fixed, meaning these values come with a package. Meaning if you're going for a 4 GB, then the performance will also be less. You cannot expect, let's say, having a 4 GB basically drive with 5000 of IOPS. Microsoft will tell basically that you cannot possibly create that. If you want a higher IOPS, then please go for a higher size. Only then I can basically provision you, or I can give you a better IOPS as such. Now that was about IOPS out. I am telling that IOPS determines how many times you can write or how many times you can read into a data disk that is attached to a virtual machine on Azure. But does this tell you, let's say 5000, let's say you are taking a 1024 GB drive. I'm now telling that the IOPS is 5000, meaning I'm telling you can write 5000 times. But how much of data can you write in those 5000 times? Can you write, let's say, 1 TB in 1 second? Or can you, let's say, write 1 MB in 1 second? This data, meaning the amount of data that you can put in or the amount of data that you can extract from a disk, is now determined by something known as provision throughput, MB per a second. Now, if I go for, let's say, 1024, I can copy or I can extract up to 200 MB of data per a second with this particular IOPS. So if you look at this sheet, as the IOPS is getting increased, so is the speed, so is the provisioned output or the provision throughput, and etc. And as the IOPS and as the size are decreasing, everything else is getting decreased. For a 4 GB drive, this is, let's say, 120 IOPS and 25 MB per second. So you can only copy like about 25 MB of a data in one particular second, and you can only perform 120 IOPS. Now what happens after 120? Nothing. The maximum limit is that much. It won't accept more than that. So the rate at which you copy the data, the rate at which you extract the data will be slow. If the IOPS and throughput are less, it will be slow. So these are the main factors that I would consider before going and attaching a data drive here. So one is the space. So let's say if it's 1024, then you will have to tell your client that the IOPS that you get and the throughput that you get are this and this number, depending upon the size, basically what Microsoft is offering. So are we okay with this? So even these will be a determining factor to go and create a data drive to the virtual machine. Okay. Any questions here, guys, regarding IOPS or throughput? Anything? Anyone? Anything online, offline? Anything, guys? Okay, so let me go ahead and select a 1024 GB drive here, and I'll say okay. So I'm selecting a 1024 GB drive here, and I'm saying okay out here, and I'll say okay. Just go ahead and create this out. Now I have created one data disk, which is data disk 0 out here. Now the question here for y'all is that how many more data drives can I attach to this particular virtual machine? Can I attach 10, 20? Any guesses here? Okay. Anyone online, offline? How many data drives? Now I have one data drive, attach one data drive here. How many more can I go ahead and attach here? Anyone? Now these are the interview questions, guys, that you know what, I have, let's say, a virtual machine. How many data disks do you think, or what is the maximum data disk do you think that I can attach? Your answer should be, it depends upon the size of the virtual machine that you select. So if, let's say, I come back to the previous page, you have something known as the size. and I'm selecting a standard D4, V3, something like this. If I say see all sizes, and this is the size that I'm selecting, right, which is D4S underscore V3. This has the data disk. This will tell you the data disks out here. The maximum that you can have is 8. So attach one, so you can have 7 more. So it all depends upon what is the size that you're going for. In this particular size, you cannot have more than 8 data disks attached to the same virtual machine as such. So depending upon the size, whether you have less data disks or more data disks and etc., this will tell you, let's say, or the size will tell you what is the maximum number of the data disks that you can go for. Okay, so that should be your answer. Is that okay? Fine. It all depends upon the size, and once you're able to see the size that okay fine, this is the size, then you can tell that okay fine, the maximum data disk that I have is 8. So let's say select this out, let's say disks, and let's go ahead and create our virtual machine. Let's say next, let's say review and create this out. And let's wait for a minute for the virtual machine to get created. Until this point, guys, does anyone have any specific questions that I can take? Anyone, anything? Anyone, guys, anything? Okay, so a question for you all is that I am creating a virtual machine service right now, and I have created a disk while the creation of the virtual machine. Now, do you think that when I log into this virtual machine, do you think I should be able to see that data disk? Yes, no, maybe? Anyone will not see? Any different answers? Anyone online, guys? Any different answers here? Should we be able to see, or will it appear, let's say, inside the virtual machine?
No.
Inside the virtual machine, like when you do an RDP session into it, so you will basically have a C drive. Do you also see a data drive is the question. So as I said yesterday, when we add a disk here, it's like we are adding the disk at the infra layer. So this is the infrastructure of things. So we're adding a disk on the infrastructure, meaning the disk will be visible for us on the Azure portal. But this disk will not be visible when you log into the system, meaning when you do an RDP into the system, it will not be visible. You will have to go inside the operating system, go into the files and storage services, and then add this manually. So how do I do it again? So if I go into this service called as PM1, I can say copy this out and do an RDP into this machine. And I can just give the ID and password here. And once we log into this machine, let's see if you're able to see that particular disk of 1024 GB and etc. So I'm logged into this machine, and once I'm in, let's go ahead and understand this out. So let's go into, let's say, the files and services, and let's say into this PC, and I am able to see the OS drive of 128 GB, a temporary drive of 31 GB, but I am not able to see the data drive that I've attached. This was 1024, and I'm not able to see this here. The reason being, the operating system doesn't really understand that you have attached a drive to it. So the way you need to tell your operating system that yes, I have a drive, please recognize this and let's use this out. You'll have to go into this particular service known as server manager dashboard, and I can say this is files and storage services. Inside this I have something known as disks, and in this you have a 1 terabyte partition. All these are called partitions. This is a 1 terabyte partition and it says it's unknown. You can just do a right click here, say new volume, say next, next, and say yes, then say next, and I can give a drive letter to it. I can attach any drive letter to this, something like H drive, next, next, and let's say create. Once this is created, I can say close. And once I go into the files and services, now I'm able to see a H volume here. I'm able to basically see a H drive here, wherein I can use this H drive. I can use this H drive, and I can start storing my files and everything. So let's say I store a file. Let's say something like sample document. I'll just write something like this is a test document. Now this is one document, okay? Over a period of time, let's say you store like 500 or thousands of GBs of data inside this particular data drive. Okay, you store like say a lot of, and all these files are very important. Now the question then is that if your virtual machine crashes or if something happens to this disk, because again in the backend it's nothing but a physical server, your disks can crash, your data, there might be a data loss. So how do you back this service up? Meaning, how do you perform a backup of a disk? Okay, let's look at that. So I have some data here. So what I will do is the performance of a backup on top of a disk. This operation is known as a disk snapshot. A disk snapshot meaning you are making sure to take the backup of the disk at that given point in time. Meaning, if I am taking a backup or if I am performing something known as a snapshot at 7:26 a.m. in my time, all the data till this point will be captured. If let's say I take a snapshot at 7:26 and add some data at 7:30, that data will not go into the snapshot. These are called point in time snapshots, meaning only till that point in time whatever data is there, that will be captured or that will be taken as a snapshot of it. Now then, how do I perform a snapshot? What do I do to perform a snapshot? Is that sorry, is that let's go into the disks. And I have the OS disk out here. This is the OS disk and this is the data drive. I have two things out. So I want to perform a snapshot on the data drive. So I'm going inside the data disk, and you have an option here to create a snapshot. So what I'll be doing out here is that it's a very simple procedure. I'll say create a snapshot, and here it is asking me what is the name of the snapshot that you want to take in, etc. So I'll say okay fine, the name of the snapshot is something like snapshot 0 test. I'm just taking a test snapshot out here and I'm just giving a logical name to it so that I can understand what I'm doing out here. Then I will say the type of the snapshot is a full snapshot. I want to make sure that I take a full copy or I take a full backup of my data drive here. So I'm selecting the type of the snapshot is a full snapshot. And there are a couple of more options that are kind of, let's say, already selected for me. It says the source type is a disk, meaning the source that I'm taking from or the drive that I'm taking from is a disk out here. The name of the subscription from where I'm taking is a free trial subscription. This is where I'm working on. Then I have something known as a source type or let's say the source disk, which is data disk 0. This is the disk where I'm performing the snapshot on. And finally, I can say this is, let's say, a zone redundant or a premium SSD, whatever it is that I can go ahead and, let's say, take this out. Finally, I can say encryption, and I can just take the default option called as encryption at rest with platform managed keys, meaning please encrypt the data, please log the data when no one is using it out. And I can say review and create. You can also go ahead and add tags to this particular resource, but I'm not just adding a tag here. I just want to go ahead and create this out. So I'll say hit the create button here. So once I hit the create button, this will take somewhere around 2 minutes in order to take the backup. And if the data size is large, if it's huge, it will take much more time basically to create a backup here. So all you're doing is just making a clone copy of your existing data disk, and you're just maintaining a copy here. So let me go into, let's say, the VMRG right now, and let me look at all the resources that I have here. Let me say group by type. So I have a data disk, I have a OS disk, two things. I have a network interface card, a network security, group rule, public IP address, virtual machine, virtual, and let me also give it a refresh. Yeah. And here I have something known as a snapshot. I have something known as what? A snapshot out here. Now what can I do with this snapshot? Is, let's say I have, over a period of time, I have, like, saved a lot of data, and suddenly my disk crashed. All the data is at loss. So now what I'll do now is that I'll come into the snapshot. So this is how the snapshot looks like, and I'll say so I'll say create a disk from this snapshot. So what I did now is that I have taken a snapshot of the existing data disk. So I've created a copy of the existing data disk in the form of a snapshot. And once the snapshot was created, I am now creating another data disk from this particular snapshot. I am now creating another data drive from this particular snapshot. And once the data drive is created, I can go ahead and attach this particular drive to another virtual machine. So for example, let's say I have another virtual machine. I can attach this to the other virtual machine, or if this virtual machine is running and I just have an issue with this particular drive, that this drive is, let's say, got corrupt, something like that, I can attach this drive to this machine also, to the origin machine also. So it doesn't really matter that which machine you attach it. The point here is that you can basically go ahead and attach this drive to any virtual machine that you have, provided the virtual machine and the drive are in the same region. Now if I say create a date, I have a region called Central US. I cannot change this. The reason being, I have taken a snapshot from a disk that was in Central US. So all these are regional resources. So I'll say okay, fine. I'll say data drive underscore 1. The earlier one was 0. Now I'm saying it as 1. I'm saying it's a 1024 premium SSD. Review and create. So I'm just creating a data drive right now, and I'm creating a data drive from a snapshot. Okay, I'm creating a data drive from a snapshot right now. So let's give it a second so that the drive can be created, and the drive will be created in the same resource group in which the snapshot is there, which is the VMRG. So you have multiple drives, multiple drives inside that particular resource group right now. So let's give it a second and let's see how it looks like. Any questions until this point, guys? Anyone? Any questions? Okay, so I'll now go into the VM resource group.
Kiran, can we take a operating system snapshot?
The operating system snapshot. So what happens is that, let's say you want to do a full snapshot. Is it? Was that your question? Hello. So someone had a question. I understand that. Can you take a snapshot of the operating system disk? Yes, you can also do that. Irrespective of whichever disk it is, you can do that. But let's say if you want to do a full snapshot, meaning if you want to do a full backup, you can also do that using a service known as backup, which we'll be looking at. So for now, let's go into the VMRG right now. And if you look at now, and if I group by type, you have three drives right now. One is the OS disk. Two is the data disk that I have created when I was creating the virtual machine. Three is a data drive one, which I created from a snapshot. Now the question for everyone is that I have created something known as a data drive underscore one from the snapshot. Will the snapshot be deleted? Yes, no, maybe. No, yes. Okay, will it be, will it not be? Anyone? So the snapshot won't be deleted. The snapshot will still be there. So if I just collapse everything out here, I still have the snapshot. So the snapshot will not be deleted until you go ahead and delete it manually. So meaning you can create multiple disks from the same snapshot. This will now be like an image from where you can now extract multiple disks out of it. Okay, this is the advantage of going for a snapshot service. Now what I'll do is I now have a disk with me which is called data drive 1. I can, let's say, go into another virtual machine service. I can, let's say, VM2. I can say this is VM2. Let's see what is the available size out here. Okay, since I'm working on a free trial, right, there is a bit of restriction basically that I do have out here. I cannot go ahead and create more than 4 CPUs in one particular region, and that's the reason it's showing this particular error out here. So what I'm what I'm going to do is that I'm not going to create a new virtual machine. I have an existing virtual machine. I will use that and attach the new created disk out here to it. So let's go into this particular virtual machine service. Let's go into the disks of it. And inside this disk, I will now say, I won't say create and attach a disk. I will say attach an existing disk because I have a disk called data disk underscore one. I'll say attach this out, and in here I'll just say scroll down and here let's select this out. Let's refresh, and I have something known as what, data drive one. So at times this might not appear, so you just have to refresh the service. And here I have basically another disk, and I can say save. And this is now attaching the disk to the existing virtual machine service. It now went ahead and attached the drive to the existing virtual machine. Now if I go into this virtual machine, I'll just close this, okay? I have the same thing again. I have the OS disk, the temporary drive, and only one data drive right now, but I have attached another one. So I will again go into the server manager. I will say, let's wait for this particular service to load, and then something we called as files and storage services that will come up. And once that comes up, I'll go into the files and storage, then go into the disk, and now I have another partition here, which is, let's say it says it is offline. I'll do a right click and I'll say bring online. So once I get it online, you have a new volume. So earlier I had F, now I have something known as H. If I go into it, I have the same sample document. So all the data is now come up in this particular drive. So if I go back and if I look at F, this was the sample volume, or this is the sample document that I put in, and this document is now getting reflected in this particular drive. This is how you do a backup. This is how you do a backup and then do a restore. This procedure is known as a snapshot of a disk. This is good enough. Now I want to detach a drive. I'm attaching till now. I have attached two drives right now. Now I feel that I need to detach and I don't want to delete it. I don't know. I don't need, let's say, the data drive one. So what I'll do is I'll come here and I'll try to delete the service. And no matter what I do, this delete option is now disabled. By default, you cannot you cannot delete a drive that is in an attached state. Now if you look this out, this drive or the disk state is what? Attached. It is attached to what? Virtual machine 1. You cannot delete a drive, or you cannot basically delete a data drive which is in an attached state. You first have to detach it. So like basically you cannot destroy something which is in an attached state. It will corrupt the operating system. So that's the reason Microsoft basically has disabled this option for us, telling that you cannot delete it in this particular state. So please go ahead and firstly detach it out. So what I'll be doing, going into the virtual machine service, into the disks, and I'll just scroll right, and here I have something known as host caching, and here I have an option to detach. So at the end it's telling me that it's a detach option. So I'll come to the data drive one and I'll hit the detach option here and I'll say save. So I am detaching the drive that is existing. So how do you attach it? So you can go ahead and say attach a new drive or create a new existing one. How can you detach it? You can come here and hit the X button or the cross symbol here, so the drive can be detached out here. So it says updated the virtual machine. This is done. Let me go back and let me refresh the screen. Now it's in what? Unattached state, and you have the delete option now that is coming up right now. I can now go ahead and I can say delete. This is how I delete a drive. So how do you attach it? How do you delete it? This is how you do it. These are the basics of how do you do it and how do you attach and how do you delete it, etc. Again, this is like frequently asked in the interview question, that there is a scenario that I want to delete my data drive, but it's not giving me the option to delete. What could be the reason? What do you think can be the reason? And once you refresh this up, you'll only see the data disk 0. So you go ahead and delete things out. Now one question that I had for you all guys is that this particular data drive is about 1024 GB, right? It's a 1 terabyte hard drive. And if I look into my service, I have used how much? 1 KB of the entire 1 terabyte. Now, do you think I will be charged for 1 KB, or do you think I'll be charged for 1024 GB? So there's no right, there's no wrong answer. So if you basically understand the question, you can go ahead and mute yourself basically when you speak out.
We'll charge for 1 KB.
You'll be
Will
charged for 1 KB. Mhm.
1 KB
Any
only.
okay, 1 KB. Any different answers here? So I'll get the question right. Okay, so one of the popular answers that people have answered is that I'll be charged for 1 KB because this is the data that I am using. Ideally, this is how the charge should be. But no, here you'll be charged for the entire 1024 GB, irrespective of whether you're using it or not. Because now what you did is that you have rented, let's say, the service from Microsoft. And once you rented it out, you said, I want 1024. Now, Microsoft, this is a managed service, meaning Microsoft is now telling that I don't care if you're using the entire service. You have rented this, this is the price, this is what you need to pay. Very simple. Like you're renting an apartment, the owner basically doesn't care if you're staying in it or if you're not staying in it. You have to pay the charge for, let's say, the entire 30 days. Right? Now, this is the scenario when you go for something called as managed disk. Like the way we created, what we created right now was called a managed disk. Meaning, this service with the disk basically is managed by Microsoft. Now you say, okay, fine, but I am a business who cannot pay for the entire thing. I'm just starting up something. Okay. So I want to pay only for, let's say, the amount that I use. Microsoft says, okay, fine. Then in that case, I will give you another option. This option is called unmanaged disk. And in an unmanaged disk, you can create your own storage account. So you have a service called storage account in Azure. You can create the storage account and then attach the storage account to the virtual machine. If you're doing something like that, it's called an unmanaged disk. So until now, I was giving this diagram. This is a managed disk. So there are two types of disks, managed and unmanaged. So if you are now creating a virtual machine service, and if you're saying if you're saying that please don't give your disk, I will basically create my own storage account, and storage account service is charged per a usage. Meaning, if you're using 500 GB, they'll only charge you for that particular 500 GB. And if you're now attaching this particular storage account to the virtual machine, this is called as, let's say, unmanaged disk out here. So how do I do that? Let me go here. Let me say create a virtual machine. I'll say this is VM02, and I will say a different region because this region doesn't have the size anymore. So I'll say it is East US. And I'll check this is test user and then give the password here. I'll say next. And in here, this is where we are sorry. This is where we are adding the disks. Now in here, by default, I went ahead and added something known as a managed disk. This is what I'm adding right now. If I just come down, you have something known as advanced. Click on advanced and it says use managed disk, and there's by default it's ticked. If I untick this out, then I am now telling that okay, fine, please give me a storage account service. And if I say create new, there is no option of what? Standard. There is sorry, there is only an option for premium out here. The reason being, this is a premium SSD that you have selected. If I select, let's say, a standard SSD, it says the selected disk type is not supported for unmanaged. So for an unmanaged, the only option that you can go for is either a premium SSD or a standard HDD. This will save your cost. Let's close this out and now say let's create new, and now you have a standard option that is coming up. So in this way you can go ahead and create a storage account and attach it to your virtual machine service. Is it the best option? Not really. This is not, let's say, the best option basically for your services, because if you go ahead and create a storage account service, Microsoft will not guarantee the best SLA. Meaning you are basically telling that, okay, fine, I'll manage it. Microsoft says, okay, great, please go ahead and manage it out, but please don't expect the best SLA from me. I will support you, but not in the best way possible. So these were about disks. How do you attach things out? Now what I want you all to try out is the unmanaged disk. Very simple. Please go ahead, create a storage account. The rest is okay. The rest is the same. You can just go ahead and, let's say, create that particular storage account and have it attached to the virtual machine service, and you can try it out. Any more questions here, guys? Anyone? Any questions?
Kiran, can we increase the attached disk, managed disk?
One second. Sorry.
After creating, can we increase the size?
After creating, yes, you can increase the size. So the question is that,
Yes.
after creating a managed disk, can I increase the size of it? Definitely yes. So for example, let's say I have a data disk 0, and you have the option of size and performance, and here you can resize the disk out here. Now in my case, it says, okay, fine, changing the disk size cannot be made in an attached state, meaning I have to detach it, then resize it, then attach it back again. So you can do that. Yes, you had a question. Can you attach one disk to many virtual machines? Yes, you can do that, provided you have this option. You have something known as what? Max share. And in my case, I have a 1024 drive. Max share is 5, meaning 5 virtual machines can parallelly share this disk. You can do that. Any more questions here, guys? So if you can, if you want to resize it, just detach this disk from the virtual machine, resize it, and then reattach it.
So in the process of resizing, our data will be stable.
I'm sorry?
In the process of resizing the data, our data will be stable.
If you're shrinking your disk, let's say you have somewhere around 900 GB, and if you're basically scaling down from 1024 to 512, the data stability is not guaranteed. If you're increasing the size, let's say you have a 900 GB, now you have 1024, you now realize that you need more space. If you want to increase your size, meaning from 1024 to 2048, your data will be stable. So it depends upon what kind of an operation you're doing, whether you're trying to shrink it or whether you're trying to increase it out.
Thank you. Thanks.
So I have one question.
Yeah, please.
So the thing is that, yeah, it's related to the snapshot. So
Okay.
snapshot, it is like something like point in time copy. The means
Yeah.
it is getting the data from the its parent device, right?
Correct.
And also you said that we can also get one more data drive from the snapshot, right?
You can get, yes, any number of data disks from a snapshot. Yes.
Okay, so it means whatever the copy that we are getting from the snapshot, and when we are giving it to one more virtual machine,
Okay.
So the relation between this snapshot and the data device will be existed, or it will be break.
No, it won't exist. No, snapshot is there. There is no connection or there is no relationship between the snapshot and the data drive. Once you create a data drive, right? The data drive
Okay.
is a separate resource and the snapshot is a separate resource.
Okay. So it means, say for example, before I'm creating the data drive from the snapshot, say for example, I have data like ABCD, and
Okay.
after that I have created the data drive and I've attached it to the VM. So
Correct.
means the data only ABCD will be existed, no matter whatever
Exactly.
the data coming after ABC will not be existed. Correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So if that is the case, then what is the use that why we should do that? Is it best practice, or is it just an option?
It's an option, not certainly a best practice. Let's say if you want to basically create snapshots for every 24 hours of time, what you can, or if you're going for a snapshot option, the best practice here is to go ahead and create multiple snapshots so that the state of your data can be captured again and again. But it's not a best practice. It's not, let's say, the best option that is available out there. It is one of the options that is available out there for your machines that is not, let's say, running on a production workload, meaning your machines that are not so important. I'm okay to go ahead and create a snapshot for it. But for the machines that is running on a production workload, or for the machines basically that is, let's say, which is running more sensitive information, you need something like a backup service which is scheduled in nature and which happens, let's say, at a regular interval of time. So that service is covered under something known as a backup. So you have a service known as backup and recovery, and that is going to be a topic for tomorrow on what is backup and how does it address the shortcomings of snapshots. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Got it. Got it. Thank you.
Right. The region is stable or not. If the region isn't stable, now that comes in something known as redundancy, wherein you want to create a virtual machine in a different region, and that is covered in something known as disaster recovery. That concept is called Azure Site Recovery, ASR. So that's a different concept again. So this is for the same data region and for, let's say, the same region redundancy, etc. So if you want to be protected with that thing, you need to have something known as a disaster recovery enabled. So we'll also look into that on how you enable disaster recovery, what is it, and etc. Okay. If there are no further questions, then we're good to close,
And
guys. Yeah, sorry.
can
Please
we
go ahead.
can we automate things in VMware by ARM templates?
Certainly, you can use ARM templates. You can use PowerShell scripting. We will also see what is an ARM template. First, I want to cover up whatever is there on the portal, and then I want to go inside the ARM template.